So our next reader this evening is Moni Brar. Moni Brar was born in rural India and raised in northern BC on the land of the Tse'Khene. She is the winner of the Fiddlehead's 2022 Ralph Gustafson Prize for Poetry, which we're very excited about. And as well, she's the winner of the 2022 Lieutenant Governor of Alberta Emerging Artist Award and a finalist for the Montreal International Poetry Prize. She believes art contains the possibility of healing. Please join me in welcoming Moni.
Thank you so much for the introduction and for the privilege of reading this evening or this afternoon, depending on where you're calling in from. Before I read my work, I recognize that there's often an absence of Indigenous voices at these types of events, so I would like to create some space for them. I'd like to begin with a poem by Randy Lundy, who is a member of the Barren Lands First Nation in Manitoba. This poem is called My Touch. A dance of birds' feet across wind-smoothed snow. Your flesh snows no sign, no hieroglyph of descended flight, but the occasional stain of blood betrays the path of mouth or hand, as if spring had awakened in some lazy neighborhood cat, a sudden new awareness of teeth and claws. I'd now like to read my first poem to you. This poem received Room Magazine's second place prize for their short forms contest, and it was inspired by a quote by Johannes Kepler, who wrote, "Where there is matter, there is geometry." It's called We Are All Mathematicians. My mother cannot read, but she knows how to count to 12 on each hand. She uses her thumb to touch each of the 3 phalanges on each finger, as her mother taught her. Ek, do, ben. 1, 2, 3. She holds 24 in her hands, 24 pennies plucked from the curbside muck leading to the post office. 24 sins I've committed in the less than dozen years I've been alive. 24 ingredients mixed into the panjiri she feeds us when we are sick. 24 attempts to hold a pen to write her name in English. 24 names she has been called but does not understand. My father knows how to subtract. He perfects the calculation for how to take something away from nothing, how to reduce abundance to poverty, condense sunshine to a cloud not yet formed, shrink joy to regret, diminish his children's dreams to bits of shame. I add, I decipher formulas longhand. I learn the addition of something to nothing is hope. The square root of poverty is kismet. I calculate the sum of time plus effort equals productivity. Productivity is equal to or greater than happiness. Resilience equals survival. I set aside shapes, but my mother is committed to shapes. She is devoted to the roundness of a roti. The parota is neatly squared away. The thali divided into perfect segments. She knows the smooth curve of a Red Haven peach as much as that of a sun-ripened guava. The roundness of the dented Danish cookie tin in which we hide our valuables. The perfect square on her passport that contains an inky thumbprint instead of a signature. She memorizes the sweet indent disrupting the oval of her great-grandson's head, the postage stamp plot where she grew cotton and sugarcane, the angles of a ramal folded in half and tied firmly under the chin, the circumference of the first Ferris wheel she sees at the fair in the next village, the squareness of the man who stands in the middle of it, making the entire thing turn with his bare hands. In her body, she holds the sacred geometries of land that used to be home, the shapelessness of a new country that continues to reject her, the sine wave of perseverance, the complete circle of acceptance. The final piece is the poem which won the Fiddlehead's Ralph Gustafsson Prize. It was such an honor to have this poem recognized in this way. It was a difficult piece to write, so I truly appreciate this. It begins with a quote by Canisia Lubrin, who says, "In these hours where finally we demand the fucked with be unfucked with." This poem is called Dispossession in 5 Acts, or How to Be a Model Minority or Not. 1. At the age of 10, father learns the power of land when a white man draws the Radcliffe line through soil, through families, and 88 million futures, a fault line of forced migration, a line through a subcontinent, through my father's body. He reassembles the cleaved halves and learns to walk again. 2. You and your friend debate about legacy. You've learned debate is a nice word for argue. He's worried about leaving a legacy for his children. You argue that legacy is an egoic hunger with a heavy cost. He wants to be remembered for something by someone. You say that we will all be forgotten soon enough. You speak from experience. You ask him to look to the cathedrals and monuments. Whose names are engraved on the plaques? The men who had them built, or those whose black and brown hands did the building, the steady layering of toil with fright? 3. You tell her what you're doing to decolonize yourself. You, the once colonized, now turned colonizer, trying to rebalance the scales for all the taking you've done since you arrived a few decades ago. She looks at you blankly. You realize she will do nothing. Why would she, after all these centuries when history has served her so well? You want to ask her how it feels to have a life built on genocide, not once, but many times over. You want to ask her, from what weakness do you draw your endless strength, enough to topple nations and me, your story always eclipsing mine? 4. You've lost your voice somewhere between the lounge and the lunchroom, perhaps between the sofa cushions. How do you squeeze it into this space filled with big voices and big luscious lives where every want is met head on? You long to inhabit a body that knows how to swagger, to proceed with sure-footedness, a body that exudes an I belong here presence. You are ashamed to admit that you long to be like them, to be mowing the crisp green lawn of pioneered land, to be laughing, lakeside cabining, normalizing and nuzzling this coveted narrative of what it means to live in the land of the true North, strong and free. 5. Learn the language inside the language. They will say there is enough space, but you know this is not true. They have the luxury of mental, emotional, and physical space to write about golden-tipped butterflies and the soft sway of spruce, while you write about survival and scraps. Learn the language inside the language. Do not combine the words white and fragility and privilege, because it will cause them to change their gait as if walking on eggshells sprinkled on an active tectonic plate. You want to warn them not to confuse intelligence with education. While their ancestors were manipulating systems to benefit themselves and future generations, yours were feeding a village on rice dust. Learn the language inside the language inside the language. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so very much, Moni. Always lovely to hear the work in the poet's voice, in your voice, and to hear, in that case, the language inside the language.